guy in the NBA should ever wear 23.
I've been working on that shot my whole life, and for that one to go in, that was liberating right there, man.
And I'm not shoving it aside, like it don't mean anything. I know it's important. I do. I honestly do. But we talking about
23 Shots of JD podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to 23 Shots of JD's new series 30 and 10, where we break down 30 teams before the NBA season. 10 days before the NBA season. But enough of that, I'll just try and get straight into it. On this episode, we'll start off with the Detroit Pistons. So, Detroit Pistons is an interesting team. Again, a common theme throughout this podcast is sort of identifying these no man's lands teams, and this team's one of those teams that last year sort of had a bit more expectations. In 2016-17, they did make the playoffs, nevertheless getting destroyed by the Cavs, but they did make the playoffs, and it looked like they could probably make some more progression in regards to them climbing up the Eastern Conference hierarchy. But yeah, they just didn't do much. They missed the playoffs. They didn't, the Stan Van Gundy system, him being the GM and the coach, it wasn't a relationship that worked completely. And so we sort of saw all these things just not pan out to what it was meant to be or what it was expected of them. So I guess we should start off on a positive light. We sort of saw Andre Drummond improve. So Andre Drummond improved drastically. One of the biggest knocks on him was his free throw percentage, and especially at the start of the year, he was, he really improved. I think he was hitting around 75 to 80% of his free throws, and he really showcased that he was no longer a sort of hack-a-shack type of individual, and that he could really, hold his own in at the free throw line. And then just on top of that as well, he was able to be more of a sort of an assist guy as well. His passing from the post was a lot more effective. He was sort of playing, obviously not comparing him to Nikola Jokic, is really much the king of that right now. He sort of was able to, be more of a distributor within the paint. So that was really effective for most of their players on the Pistons. In addition to that, they were able to draft they drafted Luke Kennard, and Luke Kennard, what can you say about him? He's sort of known as that type of, he was the workouts guy. He was the workout favorite. When he goes into the workouts, there's always that guy in the draft that's just a king of workouts. And in that draft, the 2017 draft, he was the guy. He was destroying workouts. His sort of ability to showcase his fundamentals effectively within that setting really enabled him to get drafted as high as he did. And he got drafted by the Detroit Pistons, Luke Kennard, and he saw some type of minutes. He was decent, he was okay, and I think he showed some type of potential, which is obviously a positive thing for if you're a Pistons fan. But is he gonna be is he gonna be sort of the shooting guy that you want? Like, he obviously he's gonna be compared to his other Duke teammates, and I think JJ Redick's a very appropriate comp. Like, he could very much be a JJ Redick type, just a strong 3-point shooter. You know what he's gonna give you in day out, and that's all he's gonna give. But I think Luke Kennard has the potential to be a bit more diversified. I think he can just attack the paint. I think he's relatively athletic, so he can finish with them around big people and stuff like that. So even though he didn't do the best rookie season, a solid rookie season nonetheless. Obviously, these guys aren't finished products, so he's gonna keep developing, going strong. But yeah, Luke Kennard definitely played pretty good, but not great. And compared to the other rookies that showcase a lot of not only potential but production in their rookie season, he definitely wasn't one of them. But I guess the biggest thing that the Pistons experienced last year, or what was sort of surrounding them throughout the season, was them trading for Blake Griffin essentially. So Blake Griffin, after signing his fat contract with the Clippers, sort of insinuating at the franchise that he's going to stay there forever. and then you see next minute that it's just gone off and been sent to Detroit Pistons. And not only that, his relationship with Kendall Jenner didn't. I guess Kendall Jenner doesn't travel. Like, she obviously travels to all these exotic places, but I guess maybe she doesn't like to travel to Detroit. But yeah, Blake Griffin got traded there, and I think they became one of the teams that sort of, in a guard-heavy, guard-driven league, they really went the opposite route and tried to build through the front court. So they sort of had a front court load in Drummond and Griffin, and play through them. And I think not a bad idea, because Griffin's more, he could sort of play a more point forward. He can, handle the ball really effectively, and with Andre Drummond's, renewed sense of passing ability, it sort of seemed to be a perfect combination. But obviously implementing those two together in such a short amount of time really wasn't induced to being an effective partnership. And, nevertheless, they weren't able to make the playoffs. So they missed, like I said, they missed the playoffs. But with Blake Griffin and Drummond, coming into a full preseason training camp, and if you look on social media and stuff, they seem really, really friendly with each other. Like, Andre Drummond's very much a DeAndre, like, he was really much DeAndre Jordan, except better. And it's not any slight on DeAndre Jordan, but I think Andre Drummond just provides a lot more, not only offensively, but even defensively as well. He's thicker. I think Andre Drummond's obviously younger as well, so really Blake Griffin's, his adjustment to Andre Drummond's obviously somewhat needs to be done, but he definitely is a player that doesn't fully need to adjust, because he definitely played with a guy, of similar skill set and size and stuff like that. So yeah, that was a big move, Blake Griffin, man, and definitely didn't like the Clippers snaking him like that, but man, it's the NBA business. What you gonna expect? But and as I mentioned before, the Van Gundy GM coach experiment just didn't pan out to what it was, and call it a Van fail, whatever you want to call it. But we saw Van Gundy get shown the door, and he definitely ran through that door. He left not only as the GM but as the coach as well. So definitely that era of the Van Gundy Pistons definitely didn't pan out to what it was. When he first got signed, when he first went there to coach and GM, it was really positive. They thought, they could maybe produce something like the Orlando Magic, with, Drummond being the Dwight Howard type figure. But as that sort of matured, we definitely saw that that definitely wasn't the case. Van Gundy failed, and he's gone. So, new direction for the Pistons, and getting onto sort of their new direction, they had a decent amount of change. In this, actually, that's not even the right phrase. They really did no change in the summer. Like, they had some mediocre draft picks. They picked up Bruce Brown Jr. From Miami, solid guy. He had some triple doubles in college, so bit of an all round player, and I think he could be able to contribute right away. But that's essentially all they did. They picked up Bruce Bowen. They did some little, signings here and there, but, I didn't really want to note them because they weren't going to really impact the overall franchise outlook and stuff like that, so I thought I'd just leave that to the side. But the biggest thing that they were able to pick up was Dwayne Casey. So, Dwayne Casey gets fired from the Toronto Raptors, which when we talk about the Toronto Raptors, we'll get sort of more into detail. But essentially, they got themselves the best coach in the East. He was the coach of the year, and now he's going to be implemented into the Pistons system. And I think it's going to be a different challenge, but maybe a positive person to try and take on that challenge. I think Dwayne Casey is definitely a really good coach. We see what he's done with the Pistons, with the Raptors, sorry, and made them sort of a regular season threat. And obviously, if you've listened to me in the podcast before, especially maybe in the early episodes, I wasn't really a fan of the Raptors, but we can't deny sort of what they were able to do in the in the regular season. They got the number 1 seed and all that. So I think the Pistons are definitely gonna sort of improve. Moving on to what we should expect of them. They're definitely gonna improve. They should make the playoffs. I think they have no excuses. I think Blake Griffin, maybe he was a superstar in the past, but with injuries and sort of getting older in age, I think he's maybe not a superstar, but he's still a star. And RJ Drummond's definitely still a top 5 center as well. So you got a front court probably top 5 in both their positions. So you should expect them to do a lot of work in the East, especially when, the Cavs dropping off and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of teams dropping back, and the Pistons are definitely moving forward. So definitely expect the Pistons to make the playoffs. If they don't make the playoffs, that's really, really a disappointment, and I think they got to change up the whole franchise and stuff like that. And obviously mentioning their sort of 2 stars in Griffin and Drummond, I think expect maybe both of them to make the All-Star game. So I think they could have 2 All-Stars, and obviously, Griffin and Drummond, if the Pistons are going to be in the playoffs, would have to produce. They would have to be sort of a massive figure and massive influence on the team. So definitely those 2 guys. If anything, wherever the Pistons go, it'll be on the back of Griffin and Drummond, and that's just a serious fact. On top of that, I mentioned Luke Kennard before. I think he's got to take a big step as well. People forget that he is a one year, or he's not a one and done. This was his 2nd year in college, so he's a bit older than some of these other guys. So he definitely should come into this season being a lot better. I think if he could solidify his spot in the shooting guard position and be that threat from the outside, and the way that Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin are able to distribute in the paint, I think the way that Luke Kennard could be effective is just making sure that he's in the right position, feet are set, and he's ready to go and fire when the ball is passed to him. So Luke Kennard could definitely improve, and he could sort of follow that mode of one of his alma mater brothers in JJ Redick, or even like some people said more of Kyle Korver. I know I'm just picking I know I'm just picking sort of white people here, but it sort of just. It seems to be just the appropriate comp for him, just a shooter from the outside that could sort of put it on the floor. So, I would expect Luke Kennard to step up, and we'll see. We'll go from there. And I think the biggest question as well surrounding the Pistons is Reggie Jackson. So, what should we expect from Reggie Jackson? I don't know. Like, this guy, he's been derailed by injury ever since OKC days, when he was sort of viewed as he was sort of like the Terry Rozier. Like, people forget, he was sort of Terry Rozier, like a sort of all-round solid point guard who was playing behind a superstar point guard, and he eventually got his opportunity and chance, and just with injuries and I think locker room drama, he's had some decent conflict within his career internally within franchises and coaches and other players and stuff like that. So he's very much an interesting character, but I think he still has a lot of potential. But if you're Dwayne Casey, who's been able to develop point guards like Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan and stuff like that, do you see Reggie Jackson as your potential future point guard? Are you going to look to offload him and maybe try and bring in another point guard and stuff like that? So I would expect Reggie Jackson to start as the point guard for the Detroit Pistons, but definitely don't be surprised if he gets traded away, especially with his contract and stuff like that. He's definitely someone that the Pistons look at as if you're not improving at all, we're gonna send you off somewhere. So yeah, definitely look at Reggie Jackson. But excuse me, I'm definitely feeling a bit sick, but show has to go on. Another team in the East, starting with the P, Indiana Pacers. So, geez, what can we say about the Indiana Pacers? It's completely exceeded expectations last year. Is probably an understatement. The way they were able to play last year, I know maybe playoff seeding wise, they weren't it's nothing to be astonished about, but definitely sort of how people viewed them at the beginning. Obviously they had to start laughing at Paul George, because they traded Paul George for Victor Oladipo and Sabonis, and everyone laughed at that. Everyone's like, "Oh, you got swifted, you got shafted, dude. You got effed up by OKC. Why would you even do that trade? It's ridiculous." And obviously, at the time, I agreed with them. I think everyone agreed with them. Even let's be honest, the GM for the Pacers probably you know what, I guess. Victor Oladipo was solid. Sabonis, we don't know. He's a rookie. So, I think they're sort of just indifferent about it. Whatever, it's probably the best we're going to get. We'll just do it. Just get Paul George out of here. But then someone probably forgot that Victor Oladipo's probably been training. I think he's been training in, a cave. Yeah, they've been training in a cave that no one's seen. With all the footage, with all the off-scene footage that we get now, How did no one see the development of Victor Oladipo? Victor Oladipo literally just came out and destroyed. Like, this guy, the way he played definitely was a guy that had a chip on his shoulder, something to prove. And I think what he showed at the Magic was glimpses of this, and obviously at OKC, I think it was subdued because he had to play second fiddle to triple double Westbrook. But dude, Victor Oladipo is a legit guy. I think defensively, he's a dog. He's a straight dog. And when he was coming out as the second pick in that infamous 2013 draft, infamous 2013, 14, yeah, whatever the draft, the Anthony Bennett draft, let's say. When he got picked second, the Anthony Bennett draft, everyone thought the Cavs should have picked up him because he would have been a defensive ace. At least he would have. They always said all defensive type player, and I think maybe it was him coming home to Indiana, obviously playing college at Indiana. I think maybe the familiarity of his surroundings maybe helped him, but I think Victor Oladipo definitely improved, and we'll talk about Donovan Mitchell probably later in these episodes, but Donovan Mitchell and Victor Oladipo have very similar skill sets, and I think Victor Oladipo definitely proved that he's a legit star. I think he's a legit star, and I think he's someone that you can build around with. Like, I don't think he's a supplementary piece for a championship team. I think he's someone that he could be the focal point for development. Obviously, with the Pacers, they'll need to have better players develop, and that leads me on to Miles Turner. I think what we saw from Miles Turner, in his other seasons, like he was a number one recruit. People forget that he was a number one recruit. He was ahead of Karl Anthony Towns and stuff like that. And obviously in the draft, and I think being at being at Texas, he was sort of overshadowed and overlooked, and sort of played second fiddle to the man Cat. People just didn't appreciate his skills, but this guy can really play. And that being said, though, last year I think we were expecting a bit more development. I think we wanted. I don't know why I'm saying we. I'm not even really a Pacers fan, but I think the Pacers fans wanted Turner to develop to more what Cat was. Cat ended up being an All-Star, and I think in the East, if you're a Pacers fan and how they were training, especially with Victor Oladipo and their position on the ladder, you would be hoping that Miles Turner would be an All-Star caliber player already, at least in the East. But I think his time will definitely come sooner rather than later. So Miles Turner, I think the development of him was something that was slowly progressing, but not as quickly as sort of what Pacers fans wanted to expect from him. And then, obviously, I think that sort of, that whole combination of Victor Oladipo, Miles Turner, Paul George leaving, sort of cultivating this underdog mentality, and they became sort of the new force in the East. And again, with all these teams in the East dropping off, you got the Cavs dropping off. They're just sort of like, what's gonna happen with the Miami Heat? Like, there's a lot of teams that are sort of just in this weird space, and I think what the Pacers have done and what the Pacers were meant to do, Pacers were meant to be a real bit rebuilding team. They were gonna maybe play for the draft. They're just gonna develop Oladipo and Turner, but now they've sort of expedited their whole plan, and they've really become one of the new forces in the East. That maybe the Utah Jazz of the East. They're definitely a team in the East that's gonna make some noise, and they challenged the Cavs. They challenged LeBron to some pretty tough games. So definitely don't sniff at the Pacers. The Pacers definitely in a really, really good position, and maybe a couple moves would put them in that upper echelon with the Celtics and the 76ers and stuff like that. But definitely at the moment, the Pacers are really, really in a good position to become a force like they were in the 90s and the early 2000s. So I guess that a reflection of last year. I think changes in the offseason. What did they do? They picked up Aaron Holiday, who is a draft pick that I really, really liked. A really small point guard. I think 6 foot, and obviously when people are measuring heights, they're gonna embellish it a bit. He's probably 5'10", 5'11" at best, and skinny as well, wiry, but he's a really, really good shooter. And I think when he played with Lonzo Ball at UCLA, he sort of had to play that shooting guard, that second guard position. He wasn't really able to showcase his ball handling and distributing skills. But when the team's keys were left to him, he definitely showed that. I think he averaged over 20 points per game for UCLA. maybe like 5-6 assists. Like he definitely showed out for UCLA and was able to show why he was a worthy top first round pick. So I definitely think Aaron Holiday is going to be good, and with the with the Pacers as well, who doesn't have a solid point guard. I think Oladipo does majority of the sort of ball handling work, and I think that's going to be effective as well. They can have 2 ball handlers. Aaron Holiday, as I mentioned, he really has a great 3-point shot and technique on him, so he could definitely just sit outside, maybe run a bit of the Steph Curry screen action. But Aaron Holiday, great draft pick. What can you say more about him? And some sneaky off-season signings that's probably not getting noted as it should be. They picked up Dougie McBuckets. You gotta love Dougie McDermott. They picked up him and another solid shooter from the outside. From Creighton, I think everyone sort of has this aura about him, like, oh, he's gonna be like the next Larry Bird or whatever. Obviously that's really audacious to say about Dougie McBuckets, but he was definitely a good player that sort of maybe needed more opportunities wherever he went, the Bulls and etc. I think he needed a bit more opportunities. OKC as well, funnily enough. But Dougie McBuckets was just able to, be around in the league, and I think talk about Kyle Korver before. He's definitely following that Kyle Korver progression. Ironic as well because Kyle Korver went to Creighton, but definitely follow a similar progression that Dougie McBuckets is following. It's gonna be solid shooter and solid option at the forward position for them to utilize. And I think a big signing as well is Tyreke Evans. As I mentioned, the Pacers don't really have a lot of ball handlers at hand. They got Collison, I guess you could say. But what Evans was able to showcase with the Grizzlies, he sort of had a renaissance type year. Was able to showcase his form that he had in his first season with the Kings, that Rookie of the Year season, which was like 25-5, and only 5 players have ever done that in NBA history. So, Tyreke Evans is definitely trending upwards, and I think maybe if he plays on the second unit, he could definitely be that 6-man type of year run or journey that he's gonna have this year. And yeah, definitely not sleep on Tyreke Evans because he's gonna be good for them. He'll be really good for them. So just rounding off on the Pacers, what we should expect from them. Obviously, I think with any team you want to look at progression. I think, like I said, with the Cavs dropping off and the Heat being a no-man's land team, I think there's room for the Pacers to really move and try and push for that, around that top 4 spot. I think they sewed up the 5th or 6th seed, if I'm not mistaken. So they could definitely try and push. And again, like I said, challenge the Celtics, the 76ers, even the Raptors, the Bucks. Be amongst those top 5 teams. And I think they're gonna do that by growing their young core. They're gonna keep developing. People forget Oladipo's not that old at all. Miles Turner, not that old at all. They just have a lot of young players. Aaron Holiday, and they some savvy guys as well. Like I said, Tyreke Evans, Doug McDermott. So they got a lot of solid players that are gonna contribute right away, and they're gonna be a force right away. And I think it just makes sense that if you're a Pacers fan, you should expect a step up in the right direction in regards to just wins, their play, and sort of feel positive about where the Pacers are going. If they have a backward step, I think you sort of have to look in like maybe was that last year fairy tale run, just with the whole drama with Paul George and stuff, with just that cultivation, that underdog mentality again, that sort of led them to this run, or was it real? So that's definitely what you want to look at the Pacers. Are they legit, or was it just a fairy tale story? Jeez, I'm really just sniffy. It's been pretty bad weather in Sydney, considering that it's heading into spring. You would think that spring would be really sunny and stuff, but I don't know, Sydney, get your weather together. Come on. I guess finally the last team that we'll move on to is the Memphis Grizzlies. So obviously a bit of change of pace. We've talked about the pace and them being a promising team, and I think the Grizzlies. Okay, what should you say about last year, man? Last year was weird. So they had a super hot start. They went 5-1, and they beat the Rockets and the Warriors on that one run. So everyone's looking like, geez, who is this team? This team's legit. This team's just killing all these big dogs. And then out of nowhere they lose. They have a massive losing streak. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they have a massive losing streak. There's a bit of panic. They're like, oh no, the Grizzlies sort of fallen off, and that panic manifested into Fizdale getting fired. The man Fizzy got fired. And I think, obviously there's a lot more into that, the whole Gasol drama and stuff like that as we get into, but Fizdale just gets the flick, and after he stands up for the team in the playoffs, take this for motherfucking data. My guy gets fired. And the uproar they had in the league, and I think what the most notable one was LeBron James saying, like, this was sort of, why did he get fired? Fizdale's such a great coach. He took them to the playoffs, blah, 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 blah. Like, Fizdale's like the man. And obviously, LeBron's going to vouch for his guy that coached him in Miami. But, dude, Fizdale, I think, is a decent coach. Gets his players up. And I don't think with that sort of losing streak, it was worth him getting fired. But nevertheless, he got fired, and they got an interim coach to come in and all that stuff, and it's sort of just a sour taste to see Fizdale go from coaching to that's like the worst thing you want to see, is when a coach goes to just ESPN and they just start analyzing. You're like, jeez, God, you really were just on the quarterboard. Like, they had that word, oh, Watson on Fox. You're like, jeez, God, they're really clutching at straws here. But yeah, dude, I'm disappointed to see Fizdale go, man. The guy that goes, take that for data. Take that for data. Like, that guy's the man. But yeah, I think with that, Fizdale got injured, and then I think after 17 games, Mike Conley got injured. Oh, sorry, what did I say? Fizdale got injured. No, Fizdale got fired, and then in 17 games within the season, Mike Conley gets injured. Their big contract guy who, people forget, one point Mike Conley had the biggest contract in NBA history. But, enough about Conley. He got injured. And then, like I said, the whole Gasol drama, I think Gasol, there was rumors that he wanted to get traded. He didn't want to be there. I think he said it was either me or Fizdale. And obviously they picked Gasol. And, why don't you? Gasol's really a talented player. Getting older, but I think, when you see people like Nikola Jokic and stuff like that be able to excel as sort of a, less athletic center, but just with a lot more IQ and vision and stuff like that, I think there's definitely still a place for Gasol. But, the whole Gasol drama, and then we sort of just saw them, I guess, sorry for the irony, but like, they sort of fizzle out at a playoff contention, and from there, the Grizzlies organization goes, you know what, we're going to do the big race to the number one pick. So obviously they still had their draft pick, and I think they had that mentality was correct. You have two, Conley sort of a really, really solid player, borderline star. Gasol, former All-Star, he's, I think, still a star. So you got two really solid players, and imagine if you're able to couple that with a number one pick, and obviously, the draft class was really top heavy as well. So, he definitely was going to go in and try and, the Grizzlies were going to try and, get one of those top picks. So that's what they did. And obviously, if you're a Grizzlies fan, that's probably like a bit of a sour taste, because you've expected playoffs. I think they've consistently been in the playoffs for, I think, 10, 11 years maybe. So they've always been in the playoffs, and out of nowhere, they just pull the switch and go completely 180 on them and go towards a whole tanking direction, which obviously, if you're not an intelligent fan, you probably go like, what is it? This is BS. But if you're a diehard Grizzlies fan, you definitely know, like, well, they're the bigger picture thing, and obviously with Conley injured for the season, there's no point really trying to play for the playoffs. So smart move by them, and obviously that's going to lead us to their changes in the off season. They were able to pick at number 4, which I guess was an interesting position, because there's a lot of people. I think the number 1 pick was sort of a consensus pick, but I think from 2 to 5, anything could really happen from there. There was a lot of people that were thinking, Jaren Jackson could get, picked early and stuff like that. But he ended up, I wouldn't say dropping, but he ended up falling into the laps of the Grizzlies, which probably a really, really good pick, because I think Jackson's probably the future type setter. And I think when you sort of maybe move Gasol on, or maybe you could play both them, Jackson and Gasol, because Jackson can shoot the 3 ball pretty decently. Interesting form, but he can really shoot the ball decently. It's a definitely a lot of options. But yeah, Jaren Jackson, a bit about him. He was sort of didn't play a lot of minutes. I think he averaged 12 and 5 at Michigan State, which. When you look at those numbers on face value, like, geez, man, what was this center doing? Like, people laugh at Lawyer Marketing for averaging, like, 16, 17, and 5, but, I think Jaren Jackson obviously had not limited, but I think didn't have the best opportunity at Michigan State, but I think what he was able to show is his defensive capabilities. His defensive prowess is just second to none. He's able to shoot the three, and again, like I said, he's one of these modern big guys, and as you saw in the Summer League, the guy was just bombing threes. It was ridiculous. Like, he just didn't care. But yeah, I think he sort of, throughout the draft, became potentially the best big man. I think a lot of people, maybe not mainstream media, but, these people that sort of, put a clear focus on watching college hoops and player development and stuff like that. Much like, we had Craig from Razzball.com last episode. Definitely check that out. That was a good episode. But, people like him sort of think that Jaren Jackson Jr. might be the best big man in the game. Like I said, he's just a stretch 5, basically, with great defensive ability. So, I think they got a really, really great pick in the Grizzlies. And I think that, again, gives them options to see, like, they could run it back with Gasol and Conley, maybe go ahead and try and fight for the playoffs again with Jaren Jackson Jr. being a solid, maybe power forward for them, or a second option off the bench for center, or maybe they could just trade Gasol, keep Conley, and maybe try and make themselves younger whilst getting maybe a more appropriate play, like on the wings and stuff like that. But nevertheless, they would pick up Jaren Jackson Jr., Triple J. So that I think that's a really, really solid pick for them. You can't really go wrong. On top of that, they signed some pretty interesting picks, but I think solid picks. Nevertheless, they picked up Omri Caspi, who obviously won a title with the Golden State Warriors. From the Kings. Solid player again, can shoot the 3-ball pretty decently. Can handle it a bit, but definitely not a starting caliber player in my opinion. Definitely someone that you bring off the bench that sort of just for a really solid role, nothing special. But in addition to that, they were able to pick up Carl Anderson, which is a really, really interesting pick. Carl Anderson, Mr. Slow-Mo. He again was a few, he was, I think was he number 1 in this class? I think he might have been number 1 in his high school class, maybe a top 5 at least, but he was really sort of looked at as a special talent, and in college, everyone realized that this guy this guy looks like his life isn't slow. He runs so slow, even though he's like 6'8", 6'9" point guard. He was playing point guard at UCLA. He just runs so damn slow. But I think what Pop was able to do with him at the Spurs, sort of play that Boris Diaw type role. Played pretty solid. They started a lot of games, especially with Kawhi, in the whole Kawhi drama, happening and stuff like that. He was able to put on a great showcase for him to, get the contract that he did. In the way that he's going to get utilized at the Grizzlies, I think the Grizzlies are notorious for playing a really slow pace. Defensively, they're always good. I think Carl Anderson defensively is pretty solid, so I think he fits the mold of what the Grizzlies are, but I think if you look at Carl Anderson as just a player, I think it's just an interesting pick. But again, maybe they want to play with multiple ball handlers. You got Conley, Gasol, Carl Anderson. He definitely is a great ball handler. So a lot of options there in regards to who can play through and distribute and stuff. But just an interesting offseason side. It's not the biggest, but I think obviously with their number 4 pick in Jaren Jackson Jr., they definitely have one eye at the players, but definitely making sure that they sustain their future as well. So expectations on the Grizz. They're gonna look to improve. I think the Grizzlies fans, Memphis as a city is gonna expect them to play a lot better, but. In regards to the teams that's improved in the West, are they going to be able to be a playoff team? I'm not entirely sure, but they're gonna be a really tough competitor, and they're gonna challenge these playoff teams. Like I said at the start of the last year, they went 5-1 and beat the Rockets, the Warriors. So they definitely have that type of caliber and that type of standard in their game where they want to be one of these top teams. And with Conley and Gasol, who's had playoffs experience, they know what it takes to make it to the playoffs and even go deep in the playoffs as well. The Grizzlies are sort of, in a really interesting position to see if they can make the playoffs. You know, obviously you have the development of the Mavericks, the Lakers, Phoenix Suns and stuff like that. So we'll see what type of damage they make. Obviously Denver Nuggets as well. He was basically in the playoffs, just on the fringe, which was unlucky. But the Grizzlies, I think, will just miss the playoffs again. They'll be a really solid team. They're gonna pull off some upsets on these more top-notch teams and stuff like that. But nevertheless, tough competitor, but not really. Tough competitor, scraping at the playoffs is probably the way or the phrase you want to use. And I think this season is really a pivotal one to see if Conley and Gasol is the future. And I know with Conley's contracted, I think Gasol's contract as well, you would assume that they're going to be the future. They invested this money in them, but as we saw with the Clippers, they give a lot of NBA teams just don't really, give an F about your contract. They're just going to try and trade you no matter what. But, I think Conley is definitely a point guard who maybe in the East would have been a playoff guy, but I think just with the tough Western Conference and the sort of the depth that the conference has in point guards definitely didn't aid in Conley being an all-star. And obviously Gasol, he was at one point the best center in the league, defensive player of the year, distribute the ball, everything. He's sort of a really, really solid. It was sort of Jokic before Jokic, in my opinion. So, Conley and Gasol are solid, but are they the future? Obviously they picked up Jaren Jackson Jr. and they sort of have that one eye, and he's going to be one of the potential faces of the franchise. And it's Conley and Gasol going to stick around for much longer, and I think that's going to be very much telling with the start or the first half of the season before, before the trade deadline. And I think that's where the crossroads or the intersection between if the Memphis Grizzlies go on and try and pursue for the playoffs, or if they go and try and clean house and try and develop internally and try and get a better draft pick and build a much more younger and youthful and more adaptable team. So, is Conley and Gasol going to still be there? My prediction, most likely, I would say I'll be more definitive. I'll say yes, but I wouldn't be surprised if, by the end of the season, the Grizzlies have a whole different look of a team. And, again, going back on Jaren Jackson, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Grizzlies utilize him. Is he going to be playing that powerful position from the start? Is he going to be a starter? Is he going to be a large part of the rotation? I think he is one of the youngest in the draft. He was 18 when he got picked, so he's really, really, really young, and I think it's still a lot of room to improve. And he hasn't really played that big minutes. As I mentioned, Michigan State, he only averaged around like 20-ish minutes, 12 and 5. So, it'll be interesting to see what Jaren Jackson can do. But I think he's definitely gonna have a great impact on the team, and definitely showcase why. He'll definitely showcase glimpses as why people thought he could be the best big man in the draft. But that's sort of wrapping up for the Grizzlies and wrapping up for this episode. Thanks for listening to the 23 Shots of JD's series 30 and 10, where we break down 30 teams within 10 days before the NBA season. So this is episode 3. Definitely tune in tomorrow because there'll be an episode 4. Definitely been great reception in today's in this series. So it's definitely happy to see how people are receiving it, and it's great. If you have any feedback or comments and stuff like that, you could message me at 23shotsofjd on Twitter, or email me 23shotsofjd@gmail.com. You find a bunch of links in the description if you want to interact any further. So definitely look there as well. And I'm definitely if you want to jump on, maybe you don't like the way I'm have the perspective of your team and you want to jump on and give your own perspective, I'm definitely down for that. It'll be really, really interesting to see. So, if you want to jump down, try message me as soon as possible, and I'll try and accommodate you. But besides that, I'll just get on to the next podcast. Bye!